Today is the day that I talk about that time that I wrote a problematic book. If you've been on my channel before, you may have noticed or may have heard me talk about the second book I ever wrote and queried and how I realized it was problematic and I will not ever be going back to it. And I think essentially I set out to do this video a while ago, and then I chickened out. I chickened out because it was one thing to say I'd written something problematic, and it was another thing to very thoroughly examine the ways in which I was problematic and publicly talk about that. I think it's even more important to discuss that sort of thing and to discuss times that I've been problematic and how I had moved past that and why I changed so much from how I was then to how I am now and how I am continuously changing and learning, because ain't nobody born woke. We all weren't born woke. We've done problematic things in our past, and I think really openly acknowledging those and talking about those can make a big difference in how we move forward. And even for me personally, to really openly talk about this, I think will also make a difference to me and like my journey, and really acknowledging that, because the fact of the matter is I've previously just thrown out that it was problematic without really truly acknowledging the ways in which I fucked up and how I've been working to do better. And so I'm gonna talk about it today. So welcome to this storytime / chatty video. I'm gonna start with the original concept for my book. So my second book, which I called The Light Witch, it was about a boy named Nick. He's a wheelchair, he was Latinx. Already you can be like, and then essentially the story was that he had met a witch. One night he used to go out to the skate park and do skating in his wheelchair, and he had happened to meet this girl, and she had done something to him. So she had done some sort of power thing, he blacked out, and essentially what she had done was she had hid her magic in his body, and the magic had then given him the ability to walk. And in chasing after her to learn more about her, he fell down a well, ended up in a magic society, etc. And the stakes were that she was dying, and to save her he would have to give back her magic, but in giving back her magic he would again not be able to walk and have to use the wheelchair. Right there. This is the sort of thing where I talked about in my sensitivity readers video about getting a sensitivity reader to chat about your concept. Right from that moment, if I had done that, someone would have told me that was a problematic concept. And so this is why magically curing disabled people is problematic. It says that there is something wrong with them that needs to be cured. And quite honestly, it's something that is extremely overdone by abled writers. And that was the problem with it right on the start. I also want to talk about why I decided to write that character. So in my mind, I decided to write that character because I had read a book called Rebound when I was a kid, and it was about a boy in a wheelchair and he played basketball, and I thought that was really cool. And I had seen some videos of people in wheelchairs at skate parks doing skate tricks, and I thought that was really cool. And I thought, oh, wouldn't it be cool to have a character that does all of that and is kind of an adrenaline junkie in that way, but inside doesn't take many risks, doesn't take risks in the rest of his life. And because I thought, oh, well, there's not a lot of fantasy stories with characters in wheelchairs, and for some reason I felt like I should be the one to bring that narrative to the surface. Why did I make the character Latinx? I think, if I'm very honest with myself, back then, for whatever reason, I felt like I had to write Black characters, and I didn't like that. I didn't like the idea that I had to write a Black character. I think, quite honestly, it was just internalized. I felt weird about my own Blackness, and I hadn't quite felt properly ingrained into the community, and so it felt strange for me to write a Black character, even though for my first book I had written a Black character, so I had no idea why this time I was weird about it. And I think I also just thought it would be more interesting. And So those were the character. That was how I ended up coming with that character. And so I was very lucky because I was submitting this to contests and stuff. And one of the Pitch Wars mentors that I had submitted to had given me feedback. And she said, this is problematic. And I had been thinking for a little bit that it was kind of problematic, but nobody had told me that. And I had been kind of thinking about it the more I was learning about disabled people and getting involved in that community. And the more I thought, this might be bad, but I still didn't change it. But when that Pitch Wars mentor told me this is problematic, that was exactly the moment where I thought, you have just confirmed everything I was thinking myself, and was kind of afraid to acknowledge because it meant I would have to change my entire story. And that is the truth put out blankly there. Yeah, I was afraid to have to change my entire story by knowing that something was problematic. But when she told me that, I took that feedback and I changed the story. I still had a wheelchair character. One of my CPs also thought he was Black. And so then I just made him Afro-Latinx. So then I just ended up with a Black character in the end anyway. And I think in some ways that was kind of a step in me, like, getting over that why wouldn't I write a Black character, but it was still very different. I have no connection to Afro-Latinx people. I don't really know anything about it. That was something I was learning about those people and their culture, etc. But yeah, so then I changed the story. And so I changed the story in that she put magic in his body still, but it didn't make him magically walk. He's still in a wheelchair. And that he, in chasing after her, someone pushes him down the well, and that's how he ends up in the magical world. And he still has to give back her magic to save her, but the stakes are more in that this magic is very addicting, and so it's hard for him to imagine giving it back to her to save her life now that he is so addicted to it. And so that ended up being the story from that point on. I'm not sure if I had a version in between, but I quite honestly can't remember, but that ended up being the story. And that was kind of, I had listened to that Pitch Wars mentor, and I had gone through Twitter, and I had learned and listened to more disabled voices, and I had really realized that the magical cure-all was not good, that it was bad, and I needed to not do that. And now we get to the point in thinking about like, should I have continued to write that story anyway? And nobody was telling me otherwise. Nobody was saying to me, why are you writing this story? Nobody was really questioning it. Or if they did, I can't remember. So maybe someone did and I just like full on can't remember. But that was the point I'd gotten to. I continued on with that story the whole time I was doing the second half of my querying. I got full requests and everything. And ultimately I ended up shelving the book, not because I thought, should I be writing this? But simply because I had failed at querying. I had queried all the agents I could. I'd queried 60 agents and I was getting regular full requests, but nobody was making offers. And so I was like, oh, whatever. And I remember thinking at the time, oh, nobody wants it because I didn't write about a Black person, even though I had, so I don't know why. I think because I hadn't written about a Black girl, because I hadn't written about a Black girl and I hadn't written about Black pain, and that's why nobody wanted my book, and I was big mad, and that's why I shelved the book. I didn't shelve it because I realized it was problematic. I shelved it because I failed. And it was only when I had distance from the story, even though I wasn't writing a book about a disabled character anymore, I had followed all these disabled people on Twitter anyway, and I was still listening to them. When I was listening to those voices after the fact, after I'd shelved my book, I realized, wow, that was really problematic. One, because I was writing the story with like no concept of the fact that as an abled author was taking up space that a disabled author could have telling their own story. And I had justifications, because these are the things. I justified that even though he was disabled, the story wasn't about his disability, it was about magic. And that even though I was an Afro-Latinx, I was still like Black, and that was kind of close. And you see all the problematic thoughts swirling in that. But essentially, I had really pumped myself up with all these justifications for why I should still be writing this story, when really the fact of the matter is, considering the state of traditional publishing, I shouldn't have been, because I was taking up space from someone. I was taking up space from disabled authors writing their own stories. And I think if publishing were completely equal, then we could all say, write whatever you want. But the fact of the matter is it's not. I only realized all of that after I had failed. And these days I'm grateful for it, because that's not the story I would have wanted for my debut at all. I wouldn't have wanted a story that would have hurt people, essentially, that it would have hurt people who are disabled. I would have hurt disabled people. Sorry, no person first language. But that is something I wouldn't have been proud to put out into the world, that I would have been really ashamed to put out into the world, to be honest. And I didn't realize until I had distance from the project and the buy-in to the project to understand that. And I think that's something that's kind of natural about doing something problematic, is that sometimes you need distance to understand. But I think the biggest thing I came away from that with was I was really glad that I had listened. I was glad that I had listened to the person, the author that had told me that it was problematic. And I was glad that I'd listened to the voices on Twitter later so that I could understand that I had written a problematic narrative. And then of course I started to try and go back and cover my tracks. I went back in Twitter and I deleted all the Pit Mad tweets I had for that book, because I was just so I just wanted to cover everything up. And I think that's part of the problem. I think people, you can get so caught up in being called out that you lose the point of what being called out is, which is to acknowledge that you did something problematic, to apologize. And I'm going to say that on camera. I'm sorry to anyone that ended up in CPs or whatever matchups reading that book and feeling harmed by that book, or being harmed by that book. Not feeling, because feeling harmed seems to suggest you were in your feelings by yourself and I didn't do anything wrong. Being harmed by that book because it was problematic. So apologizing and then moving on and doing better. And so for me, that doesn't just mean I now, I only write own voices. I only write my exact experience. But I do write Black characters, because I think about, why am I writing this other character and their experience as a main character that I truly have no experience with? That's why I personally don't do that. I don't write out of my lane for my main characters. And that's something I still continue to learn. My Caribbean high fantasy, originally I had a female-female relationship in it. And I was kind of thinking about it, and I had thought back to my second book, and I was like, why are you doing this? And I was lucky to have a friend where I asked, and I was like, do you think I should be writing this? And she said, well, is that something, if that's something that you feel and that's part of your identity, then by all means. But if not, and I was like, it's not, so why? And I changed it. I changed it to a friendship story, because I didn't want to force a relationship somewhere else. And I was like, this is better as a friendship story. And so I'm still learning that. I'm still learning those sorts of things, and to examine why I'm choosing to write from certain main characters' point of views. And I think that's really important to think about. I think because this is a thing that comes up where people are like, well, I guess I just can't write any people of color or any LGBT people or any disabled people ever then. That's not it. It's just why does that need to be your main character? In fact, it's really important to still include those characters as other characters in your book, as love interests, as side characters, as villains, as whoever, to still include characters outside of your marginalizations in your books. Really, what I'm saying in this video is truly examine why you are making this choice and why you are taking up space.
I felt like adding a bit more here. So when I say I don't write out of my lane, I mean I don't write main characters who have little to no connection to my own lived experience and identity. Obviously excluding fantasy slash paranormal slash sci-fi experiences which are fictional. How people define their lane is specific to them because some people have invisible identities. I'm not here to police identities. Only I can know about me, only you can know about you. But that doesn't mean I only write #own voices. I don't always write about being exactly like me, but I have a connection to those experiences such that I am not co-opting someone else's story. End of text wall.
And I'm doing my best to move forward with my future books and do a lot better. Do a lot better in inclusion and do a lot better in avoiding harmful stereotypes and getting sensitivity readers and doing my best. And I kind of think that's all you can do, really. You can't be perfect. You can't be the most woke in the world, but you can acknowledge when you fuck up and you can do better. And I think that's really important. So that ends this story time of that time I wrote a problematic book. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please subscribe. I talk all about my writing experience and advice and sometimes story times like this now in traditional publishing. And if you have any comments about this, feel free to comment. I can't think of a comment prompt right now, but feel free. And thank you so much for watching. Bye.